What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Stereotherapy. I'm your host, Lisa, and of course, Justine is right here with me. This is the show that showcases the importance of music and mental health. Sometimes Justine and I will share our own stories, and sometimes some amazing guests will share their stories with us. If you missed any of the previous episodes, please give those a listen. We loved having Grayson and Zach on, and remember, if you were enjoying the show, to please share, like, and follow our show. It would really mean a lot to us. And thank you to anyone else that's already done so. We've seen a couple new people do that, a couple new people follow us. So thank you so much for doing that. You can also head over to our website at www.stereotherapypod.com. Trying to get through that every time and read our blogs, listen to the show, say hi, and listen to our playlist. Today, we are talking about the one and only My Chemical Romance. We have wanted to do this one for a while, and no better time to just get it out there. And I know that Justine is a huge fan too, so this is for her. But Justine, how are you doing today? What's going on with you?
I'm doing okay. I got some nerve pain in my neck, but like I've told you before, if it's not hurting in one spot, it's gonna hurt in another spot different day. So
Oh, that's
just gotta keep on keeping on.
But you know what? At least I'll say this, when I look at that, like your TikToks yesterday or whatever day, I was like, hey, even if you have that nerve pain, your makeup, you always look so flawless. So you know what? Like, hey, like you've got that going for you, because every time I look at your TikTok, I'm like, if I could just do makeup like Justine, I would be set. I
I
do a
mean,
little.
it only took like 30 years of my life before I figured out how to do it. So I didn't start doing makeup until I was well into adulthood. So
Yeah,
there's always time.
I
You
know.
just gotta figure it out. Got practice.
I gotta practice a little bit. I do my eyeliner, that's about it. And then I'm like, all right, this is enough. I can't do it like everybody. But oh my gosh. So this is so fun. And again, like, thank you to anyone that's checked out our podcast so far, because I know some of you guys have leading up to this one. So this is exciting to do this, but we're just so excited to do this one. And I think we also just wanted to jump on this because, again, like I just said about the anniversary of September 11th. And I guess for anyone that isn't aware, Gerard Way, which again, if you're somehow stumbling upon this, Gerard Way, lead singer of My Chem, but just I didn't think I have to throw that out there, but just in case, because he wanted to bring some good into the world after the September 11th attacks. And when we heard like the a song, the writing that would become My Chemical Romance's earlier work. And Justine, did you know about that? Like that significance of September 11th and My Chem kind of starting like the birth of them?
I did know.
We'll just get into it and say that, you know, My Chem has just made such an impact on our lives. And I guess I'll try and go first a little bit and sum up into words. I don't know, but My Chem was just one of those bands that just seemed like the cool band, so to speak. Like either you thought that they didn't sound polished enough or they were just weren't your thing, especially earlier on. But I am someone that just loves You Brought Me Bullets. Uh and I think that record, I mean, I could go into the whole title, but we know the title. And I just feel if you are a newer fan and you aren't aware of their earlier work, whether it's Black Parade is your first one, go back. Let me, just go back into their catalog because um, although that I loved Bullets, Three Cheers just grabbed me and like you wouldn't believe. And like I'll just say it, like it was MySpace that really made me get into my chem. And when I'm Not Okay came out and you could put on those profile songs, that was just all the rage. I absolutely was hearing that opening part of just like, okay, I love this band. I loved the look of my chem. And I think for me though, it was just how they've made just this impact was the way they carried themselves. And like much like I talked about Lady Gaga before, it was just something about My Chem, the way they looked, the way they were in interviews, on stage. That's what really drew me to them. And it was just like, no matter what the publications wanted to say about them, you couldn't really put this band in a box. And they couldn't be pop punk or strictly hardcore or punk. And I think that's why I gravitated too, because I just also loved they were just so kind as a band. And I want to say they still are. I mean, for what I see, I sadly haven't gotten to run any circles with them or anything because like in the Warp Tour days you got to, and I haven't, but I am sure they are the same. And anyone just let us know because I'm sure they are. And it just really again showed me that the music I listen to those people on stage could stand for so much. And maybe, maybe they have shit written about them in a negative light in like a publication, but still be kind and know what their message was. And I just loved how learning how Gerard went to art school, and I wanted to as well. And I think that inspired me to do so. And it just was okay to not follow whatever path you were told to or thinking you had to. And I think if Gerard didn't follow those rules of society, then like I didn't either, like as a teenager. I don't know why. Like I guess anyone that like it's not like I knew Gerard, but like I don't know, something about seeing that and hearing that. Um, and again, I think listening to this band also just made me broaden my horizons a lot because I was that hardcore kid, that pop punk kid, I guess that emo kid. I liked my Slipknot. But I think my chem was and still is something so different to truly just stand alone. I just think of Warp Tour and seeing them early on a smaller smart punk stage. Pretty sure it was, but I'm not sure. But it was really, really small. And the next year, when Three Cheers came out, they were headlining. I needed it to be end up like pulled out of the crowd because the crowd was just so massive and nearly like suffocated in that crowd. And I think just being 18 and 19 and having that influence made me who I am today in that aspect. And visually, just such an artistic band as well. I mean, you look at those videos like for the Ghost of You, or even like I'm Not Okay. Like there's so much to those music videos. And I think they're just such that visually band, which I think too was just something so different. And I'm not the biggest I don't know about you, Justine, maybe you'll go into this too, but I'm not the biggest Black Parade fan. And I know I'm not saying I hate their record or I dislike it. I don't know. But what I appreciated about it was the fact that the Black Parade was this concept record. And I think that really broadened me up too, to be like, you can have a record and some concept behind it. It doesn't just have to be like the stuff I was used to where it was like talking about like boyfriends and girlfriends and breakups. Like there could be more substance. And I think that's what my chem was for me. And I think I could just go into so many other little ways they've made an impact, but I know I'm not alone in that. And I guess, Justine, I got to figure out how have they made an impact for you?
Oof. Well, well, as Lisa knows, they're a huge, huge impact on me and have always been a pretty constant band for me of just love and admiration. I discovered MCR kind of like I did with a lot of bands when I was younger, which was seeing them in a magazine and reading about them and then finding their music. And I don't really remember anybody in my school being super into them like I was. Like I know people liked them, but like nobody was like a full on huge fan. At least not that I remember them being
Mhm.
quite like me. Like I had them on my binders and like all over. And I don't really remember anybody being like that as much as me. But then again, I didn't have a whole lot of friends in high school, so that could have been part of it too. But Gerard's voice was just so beautiful and striking, and it still is. I have always been just drawn to like dark and macabre kind of stuff. Like I was drawn to their makeup, their outfits,
Mhm.
and just the theatrical ways that they always added to their music. Like, for instance, this past tour that they were on for the comeback, like they had different like looks for every show. Um, I really loved, for instance, the look they did where they all wore old mask, like old
Yes.
man mask, and their old like Three Cheers kind of get up, and I thought that was fantastic. And it just made me more interested than into them than any other band at the time. Because I've always been the kind of person that it's not only like the music for me, like the visuals add to me being obsessed with a band.
Mhm.
And My Kim is when I was like truly myself before I met my ex. And I met my ex when I was a senior in high school. So, and I was with him for 12 years. So, like, there was a lot that I didn't have that was my own. And so, my Kim was one of those things. Like, that was initially my thing before I ended up with this person. And something that I felt that was just like inherently me before I started masking and hiding who I was inward and whatnot. So whenever they reunited, I needed them, and when I needed them most, like that happened to have been when they reunited and
Mhm.
in the midst of my unmasking journey. And so being able to go see them reunited in the midst of me becoming truly myself and like breaking through all the things that I have pretended that was me, that wasn't me, was so important. And just the timing of that was amazing, you know? And there was no question about it. As soon as I had seen that they were going to reunite, I was going to get there somehow. And my boyfriend was like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna go,"
Mhm.
because he's always known how huge I've been into My Chemical Romance, you know, and so he was like making sure that was gonna happen. And I was so glad that I got to share that with him, you know,
Yeah.
because he made sure to record like as much as he could for me because I'm short and he's tall.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
he made sure, well, not only to record it, but so I could actually be in it without focusing on recording. So I was able to stim along with the music while I was listening to them and enjoying it and being in the crowd. And oh, it was wonderful. It was a beautiful moment. And before that, I actually did get to see them one time and like I think it was 2005's Warp Tour that I
Mhm.
got to see them. And I actually found a picture of when I went there in
Ooh.
2005. I think I sent it to you at one time, but if not, I'll try to look for it.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me look. I don't know. I'm
Um,
gonna have to look
it
because
was
if
a
not, we need
terrible
that.
photo because it was like it was
Mhm.
with a disposable camera,
Right,
but
that's what we had back
this is
then.
back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yep.
So it's terrible, terrible quality, but I will try to find it again so that
Yeah.
maybe we can use it, you know.
Yes.
But I'm still currently trying to tap into like what's really me, what was me before I started really masking, and especially when I was with my ex, because I masked a lot with my ex because he didn't like when I stemmed. He didn't like a lot of the music that I liked because it was too loud. So I kind of became a fake version of myself for years. And then when I got my diagnosis, I was able to start cracking away of that and getting back to my true self and my truly like inner child teenage healing, you know. And My Chemical Romance is definitely a big part of that, because they were always very special to me and they will always mean so much to me. And getting to see them last year at Riot Fest was just, oh, it was just absolute vital to my healing process. And it helped me dive into them even more so, you know, over the years. And like I obviously they've always been a comfort, but being able to know that they're getting back together and the midst of my healing journey, I'm able to dive into it more again. And it's just been a beautiful thing, you know?
Yeah, I literally I'm so jealous. I wanted to go so bad to those tours because whether it was Riot Fest or like their reunion tour, one, two, because here in New Jersey, they were bringing Thursday out. They were bringing, who else? They brought somebody. Oh, Midtown, I know came out, or maybe what? Oh God, am I at the Thursday at the New Jersey shows? They made sure to bring out those acts that kind of along the way And I love that they did that because I think it just spoke because My Chem could have taken anybody out on those tours or even the shows here in New Jersey, right? Like they could have taken anybody. The who they chose, I think it just spoke to who they are and that they wanted to do that and share that stage and that moment because like, dare I say, I feel like they're bigger now than they ever have been, and
Yeah, I
again,
agree.
so happy for that, but it's just as wild
Yeah,
because when I tell people, "Yeah, I saw them in, like, the Fireside Bowl," or I saw them in, like, Congress Theater back home in Chicago, you know, like all these venues that were
yeah,
big, but like now there's arenas, you're in the nosebleeds for $200. And like I try and explain people, it wasn't always like that. Again, so
yeah.
happy, such a deserving band for that to happen. And I feel like the whole world kind of healed a little bit when they got back together. And I know that there are rumblings, and whether people are going to love or hate this, that there's a Fall Out Boy My Chem tour in the mix.
I had
Um,
heard about that too.
and I know that, like, obviously, like, Mike Cal especially Mikey Way is really good friends with Pete Wentz, but which would be an insane thing to, like, teenage me would be freaking out then, like, to see that happen. I would have to make it happen because I was one of those people that and maybe other people can relate to this, that when I saw the ticket prices, I was like, I don't have to be in the pit. I have to be on the floor. I'm not gonna pay hundreds to be in the rafters, right?" And I'm kicking myself because I would have loved to attend anything, even being in the rafters. Like, I shouldn't have been like that. But yeah, no, I'm kicking myself. So they need to do something because
I know.
I love them so much. And I'm with you with these outfits. Like, oh my God. Like it's just so like you said too, like I touched on a little bit, there's such that visual band and just you feel
Yeah,
that togetherness. Like I've gone to so many My Chem shows alone because like much like you, like a lot of people that I knew didn't really like them. I mean, they liked them, but were they willing to always go to their shows? No.
yeah,
But half the time I would go by myself and I would feel the least alone in those crowds because whether it was the peers in the crowd or just them on stage, like I just had a place. And and I mean, I guess like I have to share like a funny Mike Kevin story about like I don't know if you remember this, but like when the Black Parade came out, they did these shows where they would be like in Chicago, LA, and New York. And they did it in like a day. So obviously I was in Chicago at the time and it was in October because it was 2006. That's when the Black Parade was coming out. And so they announced where the venues were, but you had to line up there really early because you had to secure a wristband to even buy a ticket, which I think is insane to think about if they ever tried that now. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine. But so my friends and I, we were like, it was either midnight or like 3 a.m. I showed up at the House of Blues in Chicago. And you couldn't line up at the venue, but you could line up all around, like is other side of the streets, around the corner. And then so when it was time to go, like they would say, "Okay, everyone line up," and a mad dash. Well, we ended up being like the hotel was over there or whatever, and like a restaurant, and we're kind of over there. So as soon as we saw the security guard go up, we bolted. I mean, people were falling, like, it was just pandemonium because you knew if you didn't get a wristband, you were not buying a ticket into this special show. I got in, I got a wristband. I was like, "Oh my God." But I mean, it was just insane to think about, like, "Oh my God, all right, we gotta go back at 3 p.m." And it was like a $40 ticket, right? Like, it was nothing. Like, again, to House of Blues, your floor, it's like crazy to think about. But like the funniest thing is just like I remember finally getting in. It was cold and rainy as hell. We finally secure our ticket at like 3 p.m. when they let us in. And again, this is the part where you're either going to love me or hate me or think I'm a horrible person. But just remember, I was in my younger 20s, okay? So just try and put that into perspective here. I am not this way. I would never be this way. But so we got in and my friend Rihanna and I were there and there were these two younger girls next to us like front row and they kept asking us if this was going to be rough. And of course, we were like, yes, it's going to be really rough, which to be fair, MCR shows were and are, and
It
like,
would be, yeah.
right, like it would
It's
be.
not a lie.
I
Yeah.
wasn't technically, could these girls have hung and, and been great and fine in their spot? Yes. But we took that opportunity to be dead center instead of off to the side. And so we were like, yeah, if you really want, you can change spots with us. Like, it's totally okay. Don't worry about it, girls. We don't want you to get hurt. Again, being all, I knew what this was going to do. Um, so we ended up switching with them. And honestly, like I think remember the girls leaving because it was rough. So I guess I don't feel as bad. But we were
Yeah.
dead center in the front of House of Blues. That barricade was popping off. And like it was just, oh my God. It was just so incredible to have that moment for the Black Parade CD release. And afterwards, they had to jet to New York, and go do that. And it was just so incredible. But again, like, was I the asshole? I don't know. But all I know is I was
I
dead
mean,
center and it was
you weren't
amazing.
lying. It's
Right?
not
Because
that you were lying. You were
right.
telling the truth. And the thing is, like, if I was being told that, it was either going to be like, okay, this band means this much to me. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to try to figure out how to fight, stay up
Right.
there.
Right.
Or you're like, it's not worth it. I'm going to go to the safe off to the side. And the thing is, they made their choice.
Right.
You weren't saying it out of lies. So, I mean,
Right. And
it's the truth. So, I don't think
it's
it's that bad.
yeah, yeah. It just is like looking back, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, look at me. Like, I wouldn't want my daughter to go through that at a show, like, oh my God, look at me. But honestly, though, I will say that was such a great memory. And if anyone went to those shows, let us know because that was such a, oh, they're just so great live. Like, it's almost like when you're going through those
Yeah.
crowds, you're like fighting. You're like, it really is like a fight. And sometimes I know there were some concerns. I know when you went to Riot Fest, you were saying how they
Yeah.
had to stop and it was chaos. And I don't know if it's also there's a lot of newer people that haven't attended shows. And again, I'm not
I
placing
think
blame.
honestly, that's a lot of it, and that's no beef to anybody. But
Right, right.
um, like we talked about before, you had touched on it, is that like they really weren't as big
Yes.
during their initial amount of fame, and so I think that's could be kind of confusing. But like this new generation of fans is coming out, they're younger, and they have not frequented shows like we did back in the day
Right.
because they didn't have a Warp Tour. They didn't have any of these shows. So I think the etiquette isn't quite like it used to be. And that's not, again, it's not like taking a shot to any younger generations or
No.
anything. They don't know.
Hmm.
And it's just something that's going to have to be learned in years to come, that like you need to be like, obviously you're gonna have some rough play, you're in the pit, but at the same time there is still an etiquette and knowing what you do and what you don't do. And
Right.
I think this younger generation still has that to learn. And
Hmm.
it's, again, it's different than when we were younger, so like they don't have as many chances of learning this at festivals because they didn't have those back then. So I think
Right.
that's really all there is to it. It's just learning how to behave. And when it comes to the pit, that the younger generation doesn't know. But also, it's just now with this new rise of fans, there's huge numbers and how many people are going to these shows and wanting to be right up front. And so I
Hmm.
think that's part of it as well, is that people are fighting way too much because they've grown in numbers for when it comes to fans. So there's going to be a little bit more of a cutthroat kind of attitude now than like what we dealt with back then. So I think it's just, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And I also think too, it just is, I guess too for me, if I'm paying that much for the pit, I want to be in the
I,
front and I'll
I would
push,
be fighting.
like you're right. So I
Like,
get, I get, but
I
I
get
think
it.
we've
Yeah.
got to keep the safety too. So it's like, but I can't, I can't wait to see this band again. So I'm like, all right, when's
Oh,
the
I
next
know.
thing gonna go on? I'm like waiting for that.
Like
And
I told Tim, I was like, "Tim, listen, you need to get me to an actual, like,
Yeah.
headlining show
Yeah.
because I've only seen them in festivals, and
Mhm.
that's a huge thing." I'm like, "I literally like,
Oh,
that's bucket list. Before I
yes.
die, you need to get me to a headlining MCR show." And he was like, "Okay." He's like, "You really probably didn't even need to ask me that." He's like, "I probably would have tried to do that anyways for you."
Well
And I was like, "Okay."
well, listen, we will figure it out. We will figure out,
You know,
Justine,
get
and
me
we will
to
get there.
a
Yeah, we will figure
headlining
this out.
show.
We will get you. We will go together somehow because
Yeah.
I love and respect so much. And I think again, like you just feel that energy. And it's like I think too, and like kind of talking about that energy, we have to just dive into like how this band has used their platform in terms of whether it was mental health awareness. And I think they're just so important. And I think, again, like you reminded me so much, like they were such an important band to cover. So, Justina, I'm just going to give you again, I'm going to let you go first here and see, like, how do you think, because they have in so many ways, how have they really been using their platform?
And I'm mainly going to talk about Gerard, but
Mhm.
obviously there are others in the band. I don't want
Right.
anybody to think that I'm just like thinking there's only Gerard, but Gerard has been very open about not only his depression but
Mhm.
his addiction to prescriptions and alcohol. For instance, during lockdown, he even did a live stream with Julian Baker and Death by Romy to talk about mental health because during lockdown, people were really not doing very well. And I thought that was amazing that
Mhm.
he would have came out because I mean, at that time, I think like during lockdown time, we really didn't hear much from him other than like Umbrella Academy kind of stuff. And but he has talked about that years before even, and has been very open about his addictions, which I think is very important too for anybody that's struggling with that. And just to like, I already talked about this before in a past episode, but I figured I should still mention it because, this is their actual episode.
Mhm.
Um, and Gerard has been outspoken. He's talked about what his pronouns are, which are he, they. With him being open about that also helps mental health because not only for being truly Gerard in himself, okay, but for being publicly open about that helps mental health for the trans and the non-binary for seeing that is visibility, which visibility very much helps mental health of trans and non-binary and just all of the LGBT. And that I've always liked to mention that because
Mhm.
obviously being LGBT plus is not mental illness. However, whenever you're in a minority type of group, there is a lot of mental health that goes into play and being lost and just confused. And so the more we have these bigger like celebrities and musicians talk about their own personal stances and you know where they fit at on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, it helps people not feel alone. It helps them to keep fighting every day to be who they are. And I just want to reiterate that because I think that's super important. And I love that Gerard had no question in letting people know what his pronouns were.
No, and I kind of figured you would bring some of that up. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, let me see because I it's so important every time you do bring up something like that up because I think it goes back to what you've said previously before is how our environment and in all these things, whether it is or like what you're dealing with right now with your nerve pain, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like those things contribute to our mental health. And I think the more people like you and others speak on that helps because I think people hear mental health and they immediately think, oh, well, I don't have a mental illness.
Yeah. I,
And
I like
okay.
to bring that up as well because it's like even if you're not professionally diagnosed with anything, because
Mhm.
let's face it, the healthcare system is a joke and
Yeah.
mental health is not really included even in that joke of a healthcare center. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
which is
And
insane.
it's ridiculous because your brain is part of your body,
Mhm.
among other things, but that's a
Yeah.
whole different tangent.
Yeah, our teeth too, everybody.
But it's just it's one of those things where how you're treated definitely can install into your mental health, because for instance for me, with not being diagnosed with autism until adulthood, that affected my mental health and stemmed multiple different other things like anxiety disorders and
Mhm.
um CPTSD and all these things because of my autism, but also I am also somebody who is bisexual. So sometimes that is into play with things as well, because people never took that seriously whenever I talked about it as well growing
Mhm.
up. Because it was always like, oh, well, you're not really gay because you're dating somebody who is a man. And
Mhm.
which leads to imposter syndrome, which, you know, I also deal with because of the autism now.
Mhm.
And like, am I really that bad? You know, am I really autistic because I made it this long? But also that comes into play with being bisexual, with the things I heard over the years. And I was somebody that was manipulated for my bisexuality as well. So it in turn is like internalized, like, okay, but like, is that a part of me? And it's like, yes, it is. And despite the treatment I was given, doesn't mean that I'm not bisexual. Dating a man doesn't mean I'm not bisexual. And I'm getting anxiety because of all those things that I've heard, but that's still me. And that all kind of encompasses the whole thing, you know, and people need to remember that your mental health revolves around everything that happens to you, not just because, you know what I mean, you're like thinking bipolar or schizophrenia. Because I think a
Mhm.
lot of people only think of the really like intense kind of mental health disorders, which is not true. There's all different kinds of things you can go through. And
Yeah.
so I really think it's important to touch on like your entire lifestyle and environment that you're into does definitely take a toll, and it does revolve around your mental health as well.
No, absolutely. And I think that's another thing. Like, I think this band has become over the years because of the things with Gerard being so open. And I know Frank is another one that was talking about putting binders in some of the merch, making sure that he had binders. Hey, what can we do for the community and maybe do this? And I know that there was a little bit of backlash at first on Twitter, but I think people, once they understood, and hello, this is Mike Chem, this is Frank,
Yeah.
like these people are up there constantly on the right side of things, constantly out there like walking that walk. And I think they're giving that safe space for the LGBTQ plus community. And you see it in the crowds more and more, which I think is so
Yes.
wonderful. And I
It's
love to see
beautiful to
that. And
see.
I think they've become much like we talked about Lady Gaga being an icon for the community. I could see my Kemper, those alts, like they are up
So
there.
the
And
younger generation, it is beautiful to see, because I'm obviously on the MCR side of TikTok, and
Mhm.
seeing all these younger kids that are into it and really being themselves
Yeah,
and just feeling seen is just been, oh my gosh, it just makes me even more proud to be a fan,
yeah,
because I'm seeing the younger generation take that torch and they feel like they can be themselves, and it's beautiful.
it truly is. And I think like this band again has just been like so many have talked about like too, they've just stood for so many of the things. I mean, this is just like some of the things they've stood for, and whether you agree or not, because I know like there's some people probably, but at the same time, I think it's wonderfully that they don't really care. They're going to be them. And I love that. And I think they just really have paved the way for so many important conversations in music. And I mean, I guess just society and life as a whole. And I mean, I was coming across this old interview, like video clip, and I'll post it to our blog section. But Gerard was detailing the first time that they went to Japan and how he packed really, really light. At that time, it was just before he was able to get clean. but in his mind, he wasn't thinking he was coming back, and he was going to pass. I'm like, "Oh, I don't want I wanna use the proper like, verbiage in here," and,
Unalive.
like and, yeah, unalive.
Exactly.
Um, but, and he was in detail of his depression and his narcotic abuse, like, you were talking about, and I think that really says a lot about things because he at that time, that band, his My Chem was so huge, and he truly did not think he was coming back. Um, and I think it just goes to show too to always be aware of certain things around you and people too, because
Yeah.
I mean, I can only imagine what was going on there, obviously not being there, but, and I think I see just countless videos of on TikTok, YouTube, where so many are here today because of this band. And again, I know my friend Jeremy, if you're listening to this, you were one that said you were not a big My Chem fan, and that is okay. You don't have to be, and you were gonna listen to this one anyways. So thank you. But I think that is why we really wanted to do this episode because of the fact that there are so many that are here today because of this band. And I think, this band has allowed people that were really struggling that they can overcome so many things. And I think, again, that's why it's so important to have this band on the big stages that they are. Whether you love or hate them, they have just made so many believe that they can get past their struggles. And I think again, that is what makes them so important. And I mean, I was watching the documentary, Life on the Murder Scene. It was a one back in 2006, just prepping for this a little bit. And there was something that Gerard had said on stage where he's like, it's okay to be fucked up because there are 5 guys in this band who are just as fucked up as you, but we can
Yes.
overcome to do what we do. And I think that shit like that sticks with you. And I think that at a time where mental health remains such a taboo subject, even back then, they talked so openly about their personal struggle, what they were comfortable, of course, but I mean, they were very open. And again, especially Gerard Way. I know he's not the only one, but he has spoken. I know Frank has talked in other interviews too about a previous drummer that stole from the band and what they went
Mhm.
through, and
Yep.
being a really close friend of that band member, going through that struggle and dealing with that, and just they've all just been so open and so wonderful. And I think, in one of these articles I was reading too, where it was like, fans could see their own experiences in these songs. They can relate to them on a deeper level and feel like they're not the only ones dealing with these problems. And it was the heart, and I think it's always to me been the heart of MCR's message. I think that's why fans still are gravitating towards them. And it was almost like this healing moment when they reunited and they were playing, and like, they don't, it just is when you listen to them and for the first time in so many young lives, somebody took their struggles and mental health seriously. And I think that speaks volumes. And I think, again, do we all personally know My Chem? Can we all call them up and say, no, but we have their music and their stage presence. And I think a lot of people, I think of the lyrics when I think of My Chem is, I'm not afraid to keep on living. And I think when you hear that and he's like, I almost like want to break out and sing it because I'm like, come on, guys,
Mhm.
but that's such a powerful, and I think it's just such a powerful moment when they sing that lyric and the way it is. And I think so many can relate to that. And I think it's just when so many hear that iconic G note, we all know, the Black Parade, and you see people lose their shit, whether it is TikTok, buying tickets to a tour, seeing them at Riot Fest, wherever. I think people just have to understand for so many, this band have saved them. And it just is, they can overcome anything in their minds and have that safe space in the crowd or society. So if somebody close to them is like, you don't belong. Hey, my favorite band says I belong. I'm okay. I'm allowed to do this. And I think, Gerard Way was one of the first people I remember hearing talking about his depression openly and about antidepressant,
Yeah.
how it made him
Same.
feel, and how it
Yeah.
kind of took a lot of his personality away, and it's just whether it's that or even, I mean, I'm just gonna also say like birth control as a woman, and what it does
Mhm.
to your mental
Yeah.
health. And I remember taking birth control, and I know antidepressants and that are different, but at the same time, it made me a zombie. And I remember hearing him talk about antidepressants in that way and like how he didn't like that and how these things have affected him and how, it just it wasn't the right thing for him at that time and he had to find other ways. And I think so many people in our lives that are struggling and medication is a great thing if it helps you. But I think there's a lot of things that medication can do for people in their lives that kind of it really makes them take a back seat to a lot of things too. And I think that was the first person I remember openly talking about and having that conversation of, yeah, maybe the antidepressants help me, but they also make me feel like shit sometimes. And I think
Mhm.
it just really was so important to keep that conversation. And again, like he was one of the first people that I remember in that genre. And again, maybe there were other people, but for me, hearing him be so open, um, and willingly to do so too, because it wasn't easy back then. It's not easy now, but it definitely was not easy back then. And definitely like looking at people or see like how they dressed and stuff, and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, they're talking about this. But just so much respect for what they do. So I mean, I see, which is why even though I fell off the My Chem train a little bit, just musically, I have always had respect for My Chem for what they do for people, what they did for me at a time, what they continue to do, and their advocacy. I just again, so if you're not someone that likes them, I urge you to watch some of these things, whether it's an interview or I don't know, what was that called? Like the panel or whatever. I know you were touching base on Justine because I saw that
Yeah.
too, like during the pandemic, and I thought that was wonderful too. So like things like that, like I guess you can see why. And look at anybody's face in a crowd and a My Chemical Romance show, you will see why this band is so important, and I think why they needed to come back. Like, much like they wanted to be created for 9/11 and bring that hope and a message, I think they knew, like, that there was a time for My Chem to come back with the world being the way it was, and I have a weird feeling, again, it's just me, I don't I don't know anything, but I think maybe they thought it was the right time to have the reunion and come back and tour and bring that hope and that message with all the crazy shit that's going on in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if there was another moment for them because they were needed for sure. Like that
Oh,
they
definitely.
my chem was needed. And I'd like to think that. And I think, you know, we gotta share our favorites because we could not, although we talk about the impact of this wonderful band. So Justine, I gotta know, what are some of your My Chem favorites? Because I think I know, but I don't even know if we've ever really shared it either. So like I'm curious, what are some of your favorites?
I don't think we have ever really talked about that in depth.
No.
Well, my favorite album is I Brought You My Bullets because it's what brought me to them, and
Right.
it's, like, raw and gritty compared to, like, the rest of their, discography, and, so it has a special place in my heart. But I'll also share some of my favorite songs. And of course, Famous Last Words has always been one of my
Mhm.
absolute favorites. It's reminiscent of Queen, which I
Yes.
remember hearing somewhere that they were actually the inspiration for the song. I could be making that up, but it may be in my brain because it's like, for me, they're reminiscent of it. But um, Queen is one of my favorite bands. So it's just such an anthem of keep going through everything, even though life is hard.
Mhm.
So it's always been just one of my absolute favorites by them. I've always loved To the End.
Mhm.
It's really dark, and if you struggle with like trusting people, it can kind of hit pretty hard. I've always really loved Destroya, and
Mhm.
it's something that just really always gets me really pumped whenever I hear it. Um and last but not least, Boy Division. It's dark, but it's fun and it always just gets my blood pumping, and I was super excited that they played that at Riot Fest last year.
Oh, it's
I
such a good
was,
set list.
like,
Oh my
so
God.
excited.
Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful. But
Uh,
I know you talked about how, like, Black Parade wasn't one of your favorites, which,
no.
like, and it's hard for me because I love obviously every album because I'm a huge fan,
Right.
but for me, the one that just didn't, when it first came out, I didn't like as much was Danger Days.
Mm-hmm.
Danger Days wasn't one of my favorites for a while, and then when I got to go see them last year, I was just getting like, pumped and listening to everything again. Like I said, like once I was able to get back with to see them and like everything, like, the floodgates have opened and it's
Yeah.
like I'm huge, super huge into them all over again. So I was listening to Danger Days again, and it's like, no, this album's actually really good. I
Yeah.
don't know what it was that made me not initially like it. It could have been because of who I was with at the moment, didn't listen
Yeah.
to them. And so I was kind of influenced not to listen to it so much. But I love that album. I love all their albums, but
Mm-hmm.
um I know the biggest like favorite of everybody is always Black Parade, which
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Black Parade is a great album. I love it.
Yes.
And but I think what happened with that too is that it was when another like group of fans joined was when
Yes.
that album came out. So like you have the fans dispersed in different, albums. Okay, so like we came in kind of early. And so
Mm-hmm.
then we were really like we all ended up getting really into Three Cheers because it was the second album that got really, widely
Oh,
recognized.
they were everywhere,
It
with
was
that.
everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think when Black Parade came out, it brought in another new big crowd of people. So I think people tend to focus on that one because that was like the biggest album out of the whole discography that made everybody kind of really like see who they were.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I still love it. I love all their albums, but I think that could be one reason why that's not one of your favorites
And
is because it was like the time and place. You know what I mean?
yeah, and again, one of the things that record, the Black Parade, did for me was, like I said earlier too, they showed me what a concept album was and the idea of
Yeah.
the patient and some tour that touring cycle, because I went to like all those shows during then, like Gerard Way would come out as the patient. And I think it was just such a visually thing. And like one of my favorite songs, which I'll talk about too, is like The Ghost of You. And
Yeah.
I think again, it's such a visually because I think of the video with it and it's just is so different and I loved it. But I think for me, it was because when it came out, everybody, welcome to the Black Parade. And again, I went to that CD release. I was all jacked up. I loved Dead on that record. Like Cancer. I love that record. But I think that over time, it was so overplayed that I was
Yeah.
just like,
It
"You
got
gotta
really
check out their
overhyped.
other shit too, it's so
Yeah.
good, like, don't just stop there," because I'm with you, I think Danger Days is such an underrated record, and again, I think it's because it was so different, but one of the things I
I think so
respect
too.
about My Chem is that they continue with each release, none of them sound the same, which is
They really
incredible.
don't.
And I think that's so hard to do and to maintain that, and I know, they lost some people during Danger Days, but I think for me,
Yeah.
I love that touring cycle. It was so awesome, and, like, the visuals, and, like, it was so cool, and I think that's where I saw them and I opened up they did, like, a couple shows with Blink, and I was, My Chem and Blink, and it
Oh,
was
what a
so
wonderful show that would
oh
have
my
been. Like,
god,
I think I would have
yes.
died to see
I
those two
wanna
together.
say and it was in Milwaukee because Chicago's date didn't have My Chem. Chicago had Fall Out Boy in them and Blink, and so I went to Milwaukee because I was like, "Oh, I gotta see My Chem too," and it was so wonderful, to see that, and I think for me, I mean, I again could list so many, but I gotta go, Helena for one, because again, that music video,
It's
that like
so
it's
just
so just
beautiful.
everything and beautiful. And I think that's what as much as I said I fell off, but like everybody understands. I love this band. This band was such a big part of me in I don't know how to call it emo, but because everybody calls it, but like that phase. And it was like,
Yeah.
even just having that Three Cheers, like that CD cover was like, oh, look at this is kind of like, I don't want to say scandalous, but at my age, like 19, like, what is this? And
Back in
I
our
think
day,
like, it was just
it
like,
was shocking.
right. And they were just that
Yeah.
dark band with the black and the white makeup and the Frank with
Yes.
the X's on his eyes. And
Yes.
I think it was just something about that. And I mean, again, I'll go, vampires will never hurt you. And honey,
Mhm.
this mirror isn't big enough for the two of us, because those were the very first songs that I heard from them. Like, I remember there was a kid in my TV production class. Um, I want to say his name was Brendan. I'm trying to remember, but he was really into them. And I think what drove me to that was we did a production project and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, this is like crazy, like this music. And it was my chem. And like that's what kind of got me at least to listen to them. And again, if you never listened to I Brought You Bullets, like go listen to that one.
It's if you need to go listen to
Yes,
that
it's
album.
so good. Um, and then again, like you can hear kind of that hope element that they were talking about coming after Gerard witnessing the uh September 11th attacks. Like you can hear the hope and wanting to do that and create that. Again, I know this is going to be a fan favorite to everybody. I'm not okay, but that was everywhere. It has to be said.
Yeah.
Like that was even me. I remember again their video. I'm going to go back
The
to it.
music video
They're on the
was
steps
so good.
and they're like, "You like
Yes.
B&D, oh, equipment."
I know
You can't
that
I'm like,
intro, yes.
I'm trying to, oh god, I don't wanna do it to everybody, but you know what I'm talking about. Everybody, but I was even thinking like a funny TikTok we could do with that. I'm like, "Oh, let me try and do that." But like that, step, like, "I don't wanna make it, I just want it," and it goes, and it just everything, like that song, um Planetary Go for me because it was just such a different song for them. And again, I enjoyed throughout their career the risks that My Chem have taken,
Yes.
especially on danger days and taking those risks. Uh, and Cemetery Drive, because there's just something about the way it sounds. I just feel like, and again, I'm such a seasonal listener. We're headed towards October. It is My Chem and Thursday month for me. Um, thank you for the Venom because again, it just is. And then I gotta go teenagers because
Yes.
teenagers, it just defines so much during that time. It was like, teenagers scare the living shit out of me. I don't know. I just love it. And then I love the way Gerard's voice sounds in it, where he, it's like I just I don't know, and, like, when he walks across the stage singing it, it's just I can see it's so, so good. I just love it, and I think oh,
And I think it's important to note too, if you are not somebody that watches music videos, especially if you're a younger listener, where like nowadays it's not quite as big of a thing.
yeah.
If you haven't seen their music videos, you need to go watch them because it adds another element to the band if you watch their music videos because they're beautifully done and it just fits along with the storyline of the music so well
Mhm.
that you
Oh,
have to check it out.
oh, especially, like, I mean, Helena or The Ghost of You.
Yes.
Oh my god, that one, like, just I agree. On the blog, I'm gonna post all of them because it lets me do that,
Yeah,
because they are just
yeah.
so
It's so good.
wonderful, and I think it just goes back to Gerard saying about, like, the art schoolness of him, and again, like, we touched, oh my god, a little bit on it. I can't, like oh, The Umbrella Academy, hello, like,
Yeah,
why
Umbrella Academy,
I
so good.
loved the as a graphic novel, and somewhere my friend Krista, gave me a signed copy. I have of it, of
Oh, that's
Gerard Way,
amazing.
because she saw him, and, I just loved it so much, and I was just like, "Oh my god, I have this." Like, he signed this, like, that nerd in me, but, like, and again, that Netflix, it was incredible, so I think it just speaks to that too, and I think the one thing too that, like, kinda to wrap up our wonderfulness of My Chem too, is I think I like to some of the respect lately with My Chem, because I think earlier on when they took their hiatus, breakup, whatever you wanted to call it, um, and whether Gerard did some solo things, or he did Umbrella Academy and he would be at
Mhm.
Comic-Con, some fans just wanted My Chem. And again, I understand that because you love them so much. I mean, I went to the Ellis
Yeah.
Dunes show and I see all you guys there. You
Yeah.
FCR fans are representing for Frank, which is wonderful. And Ellis Dunes as a whole, which is wonderful. Um,
Amazing band.
but
Amazing.
I think we just have to always remember that these bands are people too. So like
Yeah.
respect if they're not doing like whatever happens with my chem, right? Like whether
Yeah.
we get two more tours or only one more or an album or we just get little singles here and there, right? To just sort of respect that we have a band like my chem and
Yeah.
especially if they do save you, because I see a lot, and maybe I'm guilty of this too in my life too, is when a band gets back together or like is touring again, you're like, oh my God, they need to tour, they need to do meet and greets,
Yeah.
or oh, like, and yes, we trust me, I've been there, I feel you, but I think we just have to be so respectful
But at the
because
same time, also remember that they're so talented, they can do more than just My Chemical
right,
Romance.
because look at freaking like again, I'm gonna bring up Ellis Dude,
Ella Stoons you
so
have is
incredible.
wonderful.
Like,
I
and
th honestly thought Gerard's solo was great as well. His
same.
solo work was great.
Yeah.
We have Umbrella Academy, which is just absolutely amazing, and if you haven't watched it, you need to watch it on Netflix.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yeah, give it a
it's just
chance.
yeah, it just because you fell in love with My Chemical Romance doesn't mean that's the only thing you could love by these people. I love everything they touch.
Mhm.
So their Yoga Gabba Gabba episode,
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay,
Yes.
so like
Right. Like
there are more than just this, okay?
mhm.
And I personally think if you're a true fan, you love every kind of work that they do. You know what I mean? So that goes for like any band. Like, we talk about him a lot, but Anthony Green, we I love Anthony Green's solo stuff. I
Mhm.
love
Oh.
Circa.
Mhm.
I loved the sound of animals fighting. For me, when I am a super fan, that means I will love you in everything that you decide to take
Yeah.
on your
I will
path.
follow you. Like
Yeah,
that's me. I will
exactly.
follow like that's much like
I will follow you, and I am loyal till the
yep.
day I die.
Same.
And
Yep. Yep.
it doesn't have to just be from this band. I will love you for everything that you do. And I think that people need to be reminded that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think I'm really glad that you touched base on that because it's true. They are more than just My Chemical Romance. There are lots of things that these people do. So you should love them for everything they do. Um, and don't be pushy about it.
Yeah.
Like,
Cause
if it's
yeah.
coming, it's coming. As much as I love the silly MCR5 conspiracy theory stuff
Yes.
that goes
Right.
on TikTok,
Yeah, I know.
I love it. But like at the same time, if all we got was a reunion tour, I will
Right.
be happy with it because I got to go. I
Right.
got to have, you know. But
Yeah.
at the same time, like, don't be nasty. If you're
Mhm.
nasty, they're not going to give us anymore. So, like,
Right.
be respectful. Um, yeah, yeah. I also want to touch base as well because I had noticed it and I know a lot of people had talked about it and I read about it was that Gerard's voice has gotten a lot higher and people
Yeah.
were like that's really strange like what is going on there. So whenever you know their earlier days and whatnot, his voice sounded deeper because he smoked a lot.
Yeah.
He was doing the things as a singer that can really wreck your vocal cords. So it made his voice deeper. So then obviously when he hasn't been singing. I don't think he smokes now, and I could be wrong with that. So
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong. But because of that, his voice started to heal. And so that's why his voice is higher because he's starting to like know vocally wise what he needs to do.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to I just randomly thought about that. So I'm like, I better
No.
include that.
No, I'm glad you said that because I think
Yeah.
nowadays too, that's a thing too. So if you are a newer fan and you're getting to finally see this band for the first time, or you are someone our age in our 30s that just never saw them, maybe you couldn't go to shows or for whatever reason you didn't see them at that time. Because I do know there's some people in our same boat that really haven't. And I think keep that in mind too, right? Because you see some
Yeah.
comments on the online, right? Like,
I think that's another reason why I was like, I should mention that because
yeah, because oh,
there's all these really weird, like, keyboard warriors and like
yes.
just nasty people out there, especially with everything going on in this country when it comes to trans and everything, that I could see them attacking him for that.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, it's actually because he's learning how to use his vocal cords.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and I don't think people realize that. A lot of singers, especially when you do a lot of the screaming and all of that, it wrecks your vocal cords. There has been so many singers that have to go and get surgery done and stuff because they don't vocalize correctly when they're doing that. And so we should be happy that Gerard's voice is healthy, and that is why it's higher. It's not, it, and give it, we don't know him personally, but is an explanation to why his voice is higher.
No, and I mean, yeah, no, I'm glad you touched on that too, because
Yeah.
I like, I've got to say too, because someone, just to touch on how wonderful this band is too, because Frank Iero, he has someone also, when he had his project, like he's someone that has had other projects as
Yes.
well. And some people want to go just hear Mike Hem. I think Frank is so talented, and I think one of his projects
Extremely talented.
was the Future Violence, and he is someone, my very first interview I ever did, which Kaylee Goldsworthy, which trying very hard. I know she's very, very busy. But Kaylee Goldsworthy is wonderful. And if you caught her on Ellis Dunes, and a lot of you, if you are an MCR fan, you know who Kaylee Goldsworthy is. Frank was someone that ultimately, however they crossed paths, and having her in the Future Violence completely, as she has said, changed her life. And it just speaks to what great people they are. And also, like Ellis Dunes, again, Frank is in that band, brought Kaylee to open up and open that door. And I think just she's such an incredible person. And I think I just have to say, like, I've always felt so wonderful to know someone like Frank that has been in this business so long, is this wonderful human being still helping out people.
Yes.
And I just have to say that because I was just
Oh,
like,
yes, absolutely. I
yeah, oh
was
my God.
actually going to mention that you need to bring that up. So,
Yes, because like
yeah.
just
Yeah.
wonderful human being. And I mean, let's give it up for the Chol Chips thing too, of Frank, if
Oh my
anyone
gosh. So there is these silly videos going around about Frank and his chips, okay? And every time I manage to find a new one, I send it to Lisa because it
Yes.
just makes me laugh so hard. Because I can relate when it comes to snacks and sodas. So
Oh, same. Like 100%. And Frank also has said, oh, he has some gut problems. Me too, Frank. Me too. And they're awful and people.
samesies.
So I'm with you, team gut, gut issues. But again, like just so many great things. And I hope everybody has enjoyed this one, because this is just such an important one. I think especially um if you're someone that's really not a fan, you clicked on this, you're like, maybe you saw why they mean a lot to people and why they're so important, even if they're not for you. And they did a lot for the scene back in the day. They're still doing it. They're doing so much for the LGBTQ plus community, for musicians, for just everything. And they're just so massive. And I think it's no secret, like, when you hear how this band has made an impact on ourselves and just so many. And we want to know your story. If you have some story with MyChem, you saw them, how they saved your life, how they changed your life, how they made your life better, or how your significant other listens to them and you don't understand why. Like, we want to hear it. Like, you can either send it to our website, or you can shout us out on Instagram at stereo.therapy, stereo period therapy, whatever you want to say. Just go see us and say hi and let us know, because I really want to hear it, because this has been so fun, even just talking to you, Justine, about like my chem. And now I feel like I'm going to get back into my chem mode like after this again. But I mean, again, just let us know. And we want to hear your story about my chem, because I know we're not alone. So but yeah, I guess it just, thanks so much for listening again. And I hope you enjoyed this one, because again, we were looking forward to this one, and this was
It was
my like,
an important one, at least
yeah.
for me.
Oh my God,
For me
100%.
especially.
100%. I was like, this is Justine's like day, which I was
Yeah.
so glad for, because it is. See you guys next Tuesday, and we have some cool things on the way. So just keep it posted, and thanks again so much to anyone that subscribed, followed, checked out our show, and anyone that's come on our show that's listening to this. But we will see you guys next Tuesday, bright and early. All right.